What if your greatest contribution to society was actually within your company? Our guest today is Catherine Allen. She is the co author of the book Conscious, Capable, and Ready to Contribute. And she's also co founder and chief impact officer of AO People Partners, which is a leadership development and culture transformation firm that is dedicated to inspiring and supporting the conscious practice of people development in the workplace. That's a lot. But here, what we're going to do today is we're going to break that down. We're going to break down leadership development into an effective, scalable, sustainable practice that both supports the business strategy and the metrics that, of course, need to be met, and the greater good in society as a whole. And so I'm really excited to have her here today. Catherine, welcome to the Leaders Transformation.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. I'm excited to be in this conversation with you and to be on your show because your focus on transformation and how leaders make transformation happen in organizations in the world, to me, is just wildly exciting. And so thank you for having me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. And that is the topic. That is the reason. And it's so crazy because when you think about what we're talking about here is people skills and relating to people more and valuing people. I mean, this shouldn't actually be such an important topic. Like it should be kind of obvious to us all, and yet that's not actually been the experience. And you and I were talking about, even just prior to this, like conversations around old school leadership versus the shift that needs to happen. And so I'm really looking forward to diving into this. Before we do that, I do want to do a shout out to the team at Oscar Hamilton, because they're the ones that introduced us. And I always want to support and acknowledge those that support this show. And they certainly do. They send us amazing guests all the time. So thank you to Oscar Hamilton and that team. So let's talk about your book and why you actually wrote the book in the first place.
Yeah. So my co-author, Ed Ofterdinger, and I wrote this book to and for leaders, particularly senior leaders, because we really felt it was important to highlight, we think, two really important messages about the role that people development plays in the workplace today. And that first message, it was like two jobs, right, for this book. The first job was to really emphasize how essential developing people will be for competing and succeeding in business today and going forward more than ever before. And then the second job of this book was actually to inspire leaders to a higher purpose and a societal contribution that they and their companies can make that we're not even talking about. We don't really talk about it. We dance around it. It's implicit, perhaps an implicit understanding, but it's not explicitly a value of society. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's the main reason we wrote the book. And there's lots of how. I'll also say that we wrote this book as a business fable. We wrote it as a story. We think an entertaining story about a leader, a founder of a company and his partner, and how they realized, in realizing these messages, they were able to turn their failing business around. And in the process, they really found awakened to a higher purpose for the business that, really, they could get around, in a different way. And then we also talk about some practical ways that leaders can begin to think about creating a more development-centric kind of culture to fuel their business.
I mean, we spend so much time in the workplace, and there's a lot of talk about transformation in inner transformation, outer transformation, business transformation, societal transformation, political, economic, all of that. And to your point, there's so much opportunity in what we're already doing. That's what I'm hearing. It's like, this is what we're already doing. And I remember once somebody said to me, well, why are you kind of in business and in the marketplace? You could start a ministry and, help people to love themselves and love others and be kind and learn about people dynamics and all of that. And I said, well, because frankly, everybody is in the marketplace. Everybody's affected by the marketplace. even families are affected by the person who goes to the marketplace and comes home and brings all of that home. Even the one who is unemployed sitting on the street corner looking for, some change, spare change, is impacted by the marketplace, because if there's a scarcity in the marketplace, there's going to be a scarcity and a lack of love and compassion for that person. And so everybody is impacted by the marketplace, and they may never walk through the doors of a church, and that's fine. But we don't need to bring them to a place like that, or synagogue or temple or whatever. We can go out and be that light, if you will, in the world, and make a huge impact. And that's what I heard in your book and in what you're talking about right now. So good.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, and we spend as working adults most of our waking hours working for someone or in an organizational environment. And organizations can bring out our best qualities as people and our worst human tendencies. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all there in an organizational environment. And, I think like you, it really hit me after, nearly 25 years being in the organization and talent development field, and that side of business, that, I mean, companies can transform. They provide opportunities for people to learn more deeply about themselves, grow more deeply in their awareness and the way they use themselves. And that doesn't just stay in the workplace, but they bring that home. And, it seems so obvious, and yet we don't really make the connection that most people, most working adults, that is, don't have access to concepts around, development, human development, until they actually go to work.
Yeah. Or they hire a therapist, or they go to some personal development seminar. But then it's like, why do they have to go somewhere else and pay money when one of my mentors used to say games are a reflection of behavior? And basically it's like the game of business is the arena, right? We're in there, where it's all showing up, like you said, it's all there. And then we have the opportunity to deal with it. I'm not saying that our workplaces become therapy sessions, but there's an opportunity for us to learn and grow in an environment rather than a theoretical outside and saying, well, if you were to do this and if you were to do that, you're right there. It's right in front of you. It's happening
Oh,
moment by moment.
yeah. Well, leadership development, which is where we both have a background and a focus, leadership development is where most of the soft skills, the non-technical skills, are most valued. And
Mm-hmm.
we want to make sure that, leaders have those skills. They're essential. Well, they learn them in the workplace. And
Yes.
this is make decisions around that uh, choice to invest in leaders as a business imperative, right? But the implication today is we're seeing the impact of coaching and training and all of the supports that we've really gotten much better. I mean, think about the field of neuroscience and how we understand the way we learn better, and we have so much better understanding of all of our senses and way humans work, and that's all being poured into organizational life, right? And so what people are learning about themselves and what they're being able to do with leadership development opportunities is literally transformative,
Yeah.
right? I mean, just I'll just say this, and I have to imagine you have got your own stories of people who say that through the work that they've done with a coach or in a program, that it really has changed their life. It transforms some way in which they think or they show up, and that it really shows up at home. And
Yes.
I had a wife say to me at a gathering where her executive husband was speaking. She says, I just want you to know that what he's been working on has just transformed the way we communicate at home, and I just want to thank you. And I felt like saying, well, I want to thank the company that paid for that opportunity that
Yes.
you have really benefited from.
Yeah. That is so true. And yes, I've had that so many times where people have come up and related it. And even like when you're talking about a specific topic in a workshop, program or whatever, and I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh, now I understand my son, and I understand why he does the things he does." And we didn't have any, we didn't talk about that at all, but we talked about it in the context of business. And so, yeah, it's amazing. And that's why it's so important what you're doing, because even leadership development, I mean, how few people actually have access. Like that executive had access to that, and not all executives do, and they have to go pay for it themselves. But when you go down like in the larger organizations, how few people actually get the opportunity to work on those skills. And it's usually you either have it or you don't. And and when you talk about a talent pool and being able to get the best talent for your team, it's really not an option anymore to be able to help people to be the best they can be.
Well, I think that's really a great point that you're making, Nicole, because today, even more so than 5, 10, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, back in the last century, today there is a better recognition on how imperative developing people is. The challenge, I think, is that, well, one, it's got to be not just for high potentials, but we have to, businesses are beginning to awaken to the fact that they've got to be developing all the skills, both technical, but particularly the non-technical, the soft skills at an earlier age. Because if you think about this, young people come out of school and they've got a lot of book learning of some degree, right? But the soft skills, the interpersonal skills, the skills that may allow them to work well with each other, those are not skills that they view as relevant until they arrive at work. And they're actually, it's not, it's only really when you become a young adult that you can really begin to work on a lot of the interpersonal skills that businesses value. But that's when the development process to really get better and better at it starts when you start work, because you now have relevance for it and a context for it. The challenge is how, in an organizational environment where everybody's like in a big sandbox and there's hierarchy, or there's peers, and you got to think about, is it safe to say this or talk about that? How do we make ongoing learning and growth, which we all value, a more sustainable and ubiquitous part of my workday? And that's
Yeah.
the real challenge, I think, in developing people is the way in which organizations are designed today, and how do they enable
Yes.
people.
Yeah. And I think that, well, first of all, we can make a case for these are the skills that we ought to be learning in school younger. And I know Vishen Lakhiani, who's the founder of Mindvalley, he was on our show years ago. And he and we were talking about what they were doing with their educational transformation and transforming the way that kids learn and families learn, and just that whole system having a new way of doing it. And that's not in place right now. And so, yeah, they don't really get that opportunity unless they were on a sports team and they had an amazing coach who helped them develop team dynamics and so forth. But yeah, most of them come into the workplace. And like you said, that's where it's relevant, because now it's not so much a teacher saying you should be this, or you should be nice, you should be, yeah, whatever, right? It's like, oh, you should learn history. I don't really know why history is important until down the road. I know, well, now why it's important. So when you go in the workplace and it's like you are paid, or you get a job and you keep a job because of how you interact, and it actually is, I always say all success comes through relationships. So if you can't build effective relationships, you're not going to be able to be successful in anything in life. And so that it's just so there's a case for that. We need to be teaching that more earlier. And it's not. And so now, right now it is about the workplace and it is about learning it in the workplace. Now, at the same time, I can almost hear leaders listening to this and going, if they're even got this far, is to say, yeah, but you know what? I've got like deadlines and I've got performance metrics and I'm accountable to all my stakeholders and all of this. And I don't have time for all of this stuff, this
Right.
fluffy stuff, which is called. And the statistics, maybe you can talk about that. The facts are that
Yep.
companies that apply these principles that you're talking about are more profitable, lower
Yep.
turnover, all of that, higher engagement, and which is hits the bottom line. And so maybe talk about how do they manage all of these different responsibilities, because there's so much overwhelm right now and there's such the pace of change, the pace of business is just, for many it is overwhelming, all consuming.
So, I mean, with all compassion and respect to everything, particularly leaders at the top, have on their plate, but your people are, for most businesses, the most expensive asset they have, the most expensive investment they make.
Yeah.
And that investment can can sink your business or it can, propel your business. Um, how long you can how you attract people, who you're attracting, uh, how long you're able to keep them, retain them, what they're learning when they're with you, what they say about your company, your reputation, all of that is like a mix around your talent that can make a real difference. Let me give you a concrete example. Let me just say there are two things that I want leaders to really, particularly leaders at the top, to understand about what makes ongoing people development um, effective and sustainable. They're really two things that are really important that leaders at the top have a direct influence over. And that is that it's got to be anchored in the business strategy and it's got to be anchored in the culture. Because to your earlier point, people do what is relevant, at least at work. They pay attention and they engage and embrace in things that are relevant and in context and have some expectation around, right? Otherwise, why do it? And
Yeah.
when it's in a business strategy, it's saying that the company believes that this is an important part of how we win and succeed. And when it's embedded in the culture, it says, this is what we talk about. This is how we talk about it. This is how we incentivize it. This is how we practice. And the thing about soft skills, which I can't stand that name, but it's such a accepted term. We'll talk more about that later. But the thing about soft skills is you don't get better at them by turning on a light switch. You actually have to be in practice all the time. And that, I mean, we all know that implicit again, but
Yeah.
it workplace, people have to feel that it's safe to talk about it. It's safe to make mistakes. It's safe to, fail and try again. I botched that conversation, with my colleague, or I butted in and they've got to feel that they can engage their skills, in a way that enables them to get better in the workplace. So let
Hmm.
me talk about my partner, co-author Ed Ofterdinger. He, has come out of the CPA. He's been a CPA and an advisor to many companies and a managing partner of successful businesses for nearly 20 years. But when he was an executive leader at the tax and insurance advisory firm Baker Tilly, they decided, they made a decision that they wanted to be known for delivering the best tax assurance and consulting services in their industry. And they wanted to be known for developing leaders. And so they made a decision that they were going to be committed to that and commit to that in their strategic plan and in their culture. And they worked at it and worked at it, but kept a real light on it. And what happened? They are a talent magnet for people who want to be in that field, but they attract really excellent people who want to be there and want to learn and grow. They also are year over year a recognized best place to work.
Yeah.
And they are also now a $1 billion global company.
So what I'm hearing
And
in that, yeah, what I'm hearing in that is when leaders say, I'm too busy for this, or we're too busy, we have too many other things going on, that's actually an indication that this has to be a priority, because the reason why they're overwhelmed, the reason why they're not growing fast enough is because they don't have this. If they had full engagement of their team, and to your point, their most expensive investment, they might not have all, they wouldn't have all those problems, because they would have leaders who would be taking on the role and who'd be stepping up and actually lifting the burden from the, the leader and or executive team that's having to do it all and carry the burden themselves right now.
the idea of scaling, and that scaling or growing, but scaling as a business very much is about people being able to do the same level of quality and service at higher volumes, right?
Yes.
And with more people, right? And serving more customers or clients. But that requires that more and more people have to work together well. They've got to be good at what they do and able to, pass off and hand off and trust that work gets done. And so we have to think of scaling a business in terms of scaling the people capability to do the business.
Yes.
What we have found, and there is more than abundant research to back it up, but we know this from our own experience, and I bet that's true for you too, Nicole, is that the biggest difference in whether a leadership development program will be effective and actually sustainable or sticky is really one thing. It boils down to one thing in my experience: the level of engagement and commitment of the senior most leaders.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Every single time. In fact, I would say that the most important metric of success is of a leadership development program isn't the experience of the participants, which you want that to be good. And in many cases, they are great experiences and they do learn things. But whether they actually they get to practice and get better and apply what they learn depends on what they see their senior most leader talking about, focusing on. And so there's a lot of dependency, as it turns out, on the senior most leaders. What often happens is they're so busy focusing on the business that it's like, I don't have time to do this. And so we've come up with a mantra that seems to be really sticky for senior level leaders, because we work with senior level leaders to really help them understand what it takes from them to drive development. And so we call it owning, modeling, and driving the development agenda. Because what people in an organization need to actually experience is their senior most leaders owning their own development, able to talk about it, right? And
Yeah.
to talk about it. So it normalizes the language, it normalizes the way we open up and be more open to learning, being more vulnerable. But most leaders, and I need to own and I need to drive, but they also have to drive. They have to drive a continuous um, uh, uh, communication about what we're learning and how we're learning together and what are the most important things, because we focus on what people talk about the
Yeah.
most.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it becomes something that, you check the box, and I mean, how many leadership development programs, management training programs are like check the box, and then you move on and you really don't hear much about it afterwards. For a little while, maybe there's some buzz around it, and then it kind of fades until the next one comes along, and you really don't have it's sticking. And it's because partly, and it's like, so you think about it from the the participants' perspective, they're like, oh, here's another one, right? Like, so why do I need to worry about psychologically, worry about developing these skills? Because it's not really going to be reinforced. And 3 months from now, I'm going to be in another one, and it's going to be, another set of strategies. And so it's like, whatever. And to your point about not seeing, if you don't see it in the executive leadership team, then why should I be working on myself and challenging myself if I don't see that the leaders are actually going to, that are modeling that for me? I had a gentleman a few years back. He was trying to put something together, and he asked me, he said, hey, let's talk about it and see if we can do something together. And one of the things that he said at that time, he's since changed that and does it differently now, but based, I think, partially on this conversation. But he had said, let's do an assessment and let's figure out what needs to happen in the organization, and then we'll start off working with the managers down from there. And then once we get some proof there, then we'll go to the executive team. And I said, oh, that won't work. That will not work. I will not do it that way.
Reverse that order.
Reverse the order. Yes. Yes. And so that's, which is exactly what you're saying. So I love this. It's so good. So there's also something else I want to talk about before we wind down. I know you talk about 3 categories of soft skills, so maybe we'll quickly cover that. And then also something that you and I talked about when we had our pre-chat was having, and it sounds kind of like crazy to ask that question, but I think it's a thing nowadays, is virtue signaling and versus sincerely being committed to this. And how do you, because I know there's leaders, I've had clients that are like, yeah, okay, got to do this thing. And I'm going to be like, so into it. It's not checking the box, but I'm doing it because I want to look good. And that's really, then it blocks the transformation from happening. We're seeing that a lot on social media, right? I mean, people are like, oh, I got this video of, this person helping a little lady across the street. And it's like, you just happen to find that, catch that moment on video. And it just happens to be that there's tons of these out there. Like, people are setting it up so that they actually look good, and companies are doing it. And it's a bit of I love the idea of people doing good, because we're all about that. But there's also, why don't you just do it because it's the right thing to do and not because you're going to be acknowledged for it?
Oh boy. Yeah. Okay. So let me just say somewhat quickly, although it could be its own long conversation. I think about all the ways to simplify the way we think about developing people. It has to become more simplified. It's got to become more approachable. And one of the areas that it needs to be more approachable and understandable is around, what are we talking about in terms of skills and what's most important? If I could only really get good at some core things, how would that do me the best good at the job I'm at and throughout my career, right? And what do employers need the most that fuels the success of the business in a sustainable way? And, really boiling it down. One of the challenges with the term and the concept of soft skills is it's this big bucket of every human skill that's not technical.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're kind of, is it this, is it that? It's, 169 things at this, and it's just too much. And so we thought in terms of, if you could break down the most important things. For us, it is around the ways we use our brain, or what we call mind skill, the brain-based cognitive skills that are associated with learning and problem solving. And those are things like, and this is a kind of a big term now, but it's really important, executive function skills. So what are those? Those are focus, being able to focus, which is really important these days. Being able to organize and prioritize, what I have to do, what's most important. Growth mindset is a mind skill. It's a brain-based skill. And it's every organization, many want that, but critical thinking, decision-making, adaptability, these are all things that we need our mind for. So we need to understand them. And just by being exposed to them, and knowing that a company values them, we naturally want to walk into them learn about them, and there's a learning kind of movement towards just from knowing in an organization I work for, it's important and they care about it. Then on the real interrelational skills, those are what we call people skills. And so people skills are the interpersonal skills you need to work well with other people. So if you think about, we all have to think at higher levels, at higher capacities, especially since AI and automation are going to change the way we do a lot of our work. So the most important skills are going to start by being the human skills that we need to think at higher levels and work well with other people. And
Mhm.
so that's going to be emotional intelligence and self-awareness and good active listening with communication and teamwork. And we tracked 11 people skills and 7 mind skills that we think, if companies really could just focus on those or a subset of those, think about what you could do if all of the employees could show real commitment and progress, not perfection, but just progress. And if that became what's important. So there's a lot of work to be done, and a lot of companies are doing work around core skills. And so we think that there's lots of ways to think about that. So there's that. To your point about why really do this and how authentic am I in doing it? I think that in business is very influenced and peer driven. And that's okay. Uh, we need to start thinking about, why do we develop people really? And if, it's important for businesses to be successful from their investment in developing people. That's really important. And that's the first thing that will happen. But the other real opportunity that we don't talk about, that we really need to start talking about in the 21st century, for heaven's sake, is the value and the higher purpose that comes from developing human capabilities. Because if you think about how fast our world changes, how volatile it is, environmentally, socially, how complicated things are, we really do have to operate at higher levels of cognitive, emotional, and social intelligence, no matter whether we're at work or we're at home or, on the softball field. And so what a business can do when it invests in developing human capability to elevate it, that I believe is the most important contribution we actually can make.
Yeah.
And with that precedent, we recognize and incentivize companies for their environmental stewardship. We recognize and incentivize companies for their philanthropic commitments, but we don't recognize and incentivize companies for their contribution of capable people. So let's make that a thing.
Yes, 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 absolutely. And I was just pulling out your book here, Conscious, Capable, and Ready to Contribute: How Employee Development Can Become the Highest Form of Social Contribution. Like where we started, we were talking about it. When you think about why we're actually doing the things we're doing, business is just a vehicle to create value in the marketplace, value in the world, and to create an environment where people can actually do meaningful work and make a difference and be the best that they can possibly be. And so if we're helping them to do that, how does that impact society? How does that impact the world around us and all the other things that get to be transformed right now? It really starts here. So I love that. I love that. And I'm going to do a plug also, because in your book, it is a fable, but it's also very practical. Like you said, you've identified the 3 categories of soft skills and the main core skills in each of those, and then how to develop those skills and all of that. So if for those people who are listening and or watching, if you're looking at it and saying, hey, we need to work on this, we need to maybe even just as a litmus test and check in and say, okay, how many of these skills do you think have been developed within your organization currently? Where would you rate your team? And of course, it's going to vary based on person, but overall, where would you rate your team from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100 on these skills? And if it's a low skill, it's a low rating, then maybe that's an area where you want to focus on. And maybe you're not going to focus on all of them at the same time, but you take a few and you start there. And what I was hearing, Catherine, what you were talking about, that is that like there's a domino effect that happens. Like if you start with some of those core habits, they lead to the other core habits and they lead to the other core habits. And so it's like listening leads to, I don't know, leads to empathy and compassion and connection and whatever. And so you start developing these. And man, when we look at social media and all the things in the mainstream media and all the division in this country alone, but also around the world, we could use these soft skills. These are actually more important, even, or certainly equally as important as all the rest of the skills that are promoted, in the world. So yeah, it's good.
Well, if business can care as much, if they could think about their success as much in terms of the capable, thriving people that they contribute as they do, how much money they make for their shareholders or their stakeholders. If we could kind of flip that in terms of what we value, we are really on our way to a more sustainable and equitable and happier society. And I think business is really going to be where it happens the most and the best. So it's really a challenge and my own and my partners and all of us, really. I mean, we're all a community that really wants and sees the potential of human flourishing because of the workplace. So
yeah. Yeah, this is the transformation that gets to happen, and it goes deeper than the surface, and we get to go there, and it's so worth it, though. It is so worth it. I think about leadership and how people define leadership, and to me, I look at a leader, not getting into the necessarily the definition or qualities and characteristics, but all of them, because there's several, but one of them that I think is really important is I think that great leaders build leaders. Great leaders, you'll know how great a leader you are by the number of people that you have developed as leaders. So that's first and foremost. So Catherine, thank you so much for being here today. I so enjoyed this conversation, and we're going to make sure, of course, the links to your website, aopeoplepartners.com, is in the on our website, and also to your book and to your LinkedIn, so people can connect with you and learn more about it, follow your posts and the thought leadership that you're putting out there, you and your partner, Ed. And so thank you again for that. I appreciate it.
Wonderful conversation. You've gotten me fired up.
Yeah, we're ready to go for the day. It's early morning and we're like, okay, let's go. Let's take on the world. So this was awesome. I always say leaders of transformation take action. So I'm going to encourage our listeners and our viewers, take action on something you learned today. Maybe you look at it and maybe you say, I'm a leader in an organization. And like I said, get the book, do a litmus test out, rate your organization. Or if you don't see yourself as a leader and you're listening to this, you're like, I don't know why I'm listening to this, but somehow here I'm at the end of this conversation. I don't know, how do I apply this? You know what? You don't need to wait for some leader or organization to help you to develop these skills. If you are looking for that next promotion, if you're looking to grow and to be an effective leader that people actually want to hire, then I would encourage you to get the book and start applying these principles for yourself. And have your list, and maybe you take one skill a month and you just, immerse yourself in that skill and developing that skill and applying that skill in every arena, wherever you go. I think you'll see an amazing transformation over the years, and you will make yourself more valuable to any company, because truthfully, yes, the skills, the product knowledge, and all the things, the experience, or what people, organizations will look for. But when it comes right down to it, I know a lot of leaders, even myself included, if I had to choose between somebody who has a lot of people skills or a lot of product knowledge, I'll choose people skills all day, every day. And because the product knowledge that can be learned. But if they don't, if they don't have the people skills and they don't want to learn the people skills, man, it's hard to teach it. So anyway, I encourage you to do that. We'd love to hear your stories and how this has impacted you. You can go on leadersoftransformation.com, reach out to us there. Of course, follow us on social as well. And again, thank you for being here. And we look forward to seeing you next week on another episode of the Leaders of Transformation. Have a great day.